Hi, this is Jürgen Rasmussen. Welcome to the Provocative Hypnosis Vlog. This video is about how to fail spectacularly and consistently as a client in psychotherapy, coaching, and other forms of change work. It's not random who fails consistently in this endeavor, and if you want to know how to fail consistently, take it from me. I've seen clients professionally for the last 23 years. I've had a lot of client failures, meaning I've had a lot of clients who haven't changed at all. Now, everyone who works with clients has had that. And anyone who claims not to is quite simply a liar and a bullshitter. But given that I've seen a lot of people who haven't changed, I've been able to discern some patterns that if you apply them, you will maximize your chances to fail as a client. Now, let me tell you this, change work can be very forgiving, and no one really understands all the elements that go into human change. So even if you follow all of these tips and strategies that I outline here, there's still a chance that you could screw it up. There's still a chance that you could actually make changes anyways. I'm sure many of you can come up with counterexamples. So I'm not promising anything. I'm just saying that if you adopt these strategies, you maximize your chances for failure. Now, understand this. In any change work, psychotherapy, or coaching encounter, there are various elements at play. So for example, the skills, capacities, mindsets of the coach or therapist matters. What that person brings to the table matters. Of course, what the client brings to the table also matters a lot. And the relationship between you people and what else is happening in your life simultaneously also matters. So if you want a really good strategy, it's nice to have a roadmap so you could choose the wrong therapist to make sure that you contribute via various ignorant and assholic type behaviors to make the relationship with your helper as poor as possible, and that you also show up with a mindset and a life, a way of being in the world that makes change the least likely, so to speak. So let's start with you. Let's start with your mindset and your identity and how you fundamentally see yourself. The most important thing you can do to have a crappy life and to ensure that as well as you can that positive change won't occur is to adapt the identity of a victim. Make sure that you see yourself as a victim. Now, there's a distinction here. Sometimes in life people are victimized, meaning the state may create unfair advantages for someone's business competitors, and that contributes to someone going bankrupt, through unreasonable laws, or someone mugs you or rapes you or runs you over with a car, or your house burns down, you lose your job, your wife leaves you. But there's a distinction to be made between that and the identity of being a victim. So to most effectively adopt the identity of being a victim, my best tip is to take psychiatry really seriously. Like, uncritically buy into the premises of psychiatry, psychiatric guild interests, and pharmaceutical companies. Meaning, if you struggle psychologically and you're unhappy, accept the premise that your unhappiness, whether it's labeled depression or anxiety or hearing voices or being obsessive, Accept the premise that this is a disease, that it's a brain disease in the same way that cancer is a disease, right? Really buy into the idea that it's probably mostly determined by genetics and early childhood attachment and events. Buy into the idea that it's a chemical imbalance in your brain. That's a really good one. So uncritically buy into the idea that you're sick, that it's a disease or illness of some sort, that you have a broken brain, and that you have a chemical imbalance, and that there's relatively little that you can do to help yourself. Of course, don't read up on the topic. Don't look at the science, because if you did, you would discover that psychiatry has as much scientific basis for its diagnosis as homeopathy. There's nothing there. You would discover that the whole idea of chemical imbalances is as close to being completely debunked as any theory could reasonably be. Start using dangerous brain drugs. Start using psychiatric drugs. Never ask for any medical tests, obviously. Don't look to the science here either, so that you could discover that the meta studies show that no psychiatric drugs are long-term effective for anything that it claims to be effective for, and that no psychiatric medication over time is likely to be more effective than not using the drugs. Also, electroshock therapy is great. I mean, anything that could damage your brain as an organ is really, really great. That could give you actual brain damage. So neuroleptics, long-term use of psychiatric drugs, electroshock therapy, combined with the whole identity of having a broken brain and a chemical imbalance, a belief in more or less genetic determinism, that works pretty well. Now, of course, you don't want to just passively accept these things. Of course, you have to act on them as well. So if you can, make sure that you get if you live in a country where it's possible, make sure that you could get a welfare deal based upon your psychiatric or addiction or pain, psychosomatic symptom based issue. So make sure that you do that. I used to work, I spent a year working for the Norwegian state or government as a consultant for the long-term unemployed back in 2000, 2001. And I remember the numbers being quite gruesome, that if people were unemployed more than a year, they started becoming these chronic unemployed folks, and they had these diagnoses as well. It really starts looking bleak that they will really come back. So make sure that you do that. So that you have the financial incentive not to change. Something else that you can do too, which is excellent, is become a member of groups like phobia groups, anxiety groups, depression groups, trauma groups, stuff like that. This is perfect if you want to stay stuck, because obviously everyone there is depressed, everyone there is anxious, and no one really has a solution, so to speak. Make sure that you spend time there, and so that your identity becomes hooked up to a problem that you claim to solve, so that if you ever solve it, you'll no longer quite know who you are. Like getting rid of it or overcoming it begins to look threatening. And also, what really helps as well is that if you spend a lot of time in these groups, your friends, your social network suddenly becomes fellow sufferers. So I mean, if you then suddenly change, you'll likely lose your friends. They'll no longer like you, right? And they'll do everything they can to drag you back in. So, basing your identity on these things, making sure that you get paid for it so that it's like a job, and making sure that your social life and your friendships are also hooked up to it, it's a pretty effective way to stay stuck. So I highly recommend doing those things. Also, um, this is a great way of like gaining significance and approval, right? We don't really do it. It just looks that way, when we don't quite understand our own experience. But most of us seek to be significant in the eyes of others. So in the family system that you're in, your brother or your sister or your parents or whoever, you know, may be seeking significance through their athletic pursuits or their musical talent or just how they show up in the world as a decent human being, being someone who helps, who's generous, who wants the best for people, or by having a good career, or by being a good parent, you know. But this is a way for you to get those significancy needs. I'll put needs in quotation marks, but significancy needs reached by being the one with the really big problem, the really big problem that's unsolvable, that no doctor or psychiatrist or drug or anyone can solve. You get to be the significant one in that, and you always have an alibi, because you can always blame your symptoms. And it's a really nice way to kind of get love and, well, love in quotation marks again, but approval from and support from other people. It also makes your social life way more stable, because either people have a tendency to bail on you, or they completely buy into the premise of how you're supposed to deal with the person who suffers. So this can often be a very good way of like exercising control indirectly over family members and partners and children and stuff like that, while never being held accountable. It's really, really great. So make sure that you do that as well, so that you really, stack the deck against yourself. Now, in terms of choosing a coach or a therapist, if you fundamentally view yourself as a victim, you're going to unconsciously then very easily project onto someone else to be your savior, right? But if you let someone save you kind of lose. So instead you want to be that person who defeats all these therapists, right? Because that's kind of how you get your significance. But if you hold on to your victim status, you're going to project onto someone else to either be the powerful hypnotist, or the super kind, sage-like altruist, or the power-hungry psychiatrist who will then adopt the responsible role, of treating you like a victim, and make sure that you get supported by the state and that you get everything you need. And see, this is a power rush, and this helps establish the identity of the psychiatrist or the do-gooder as a good person who's fighting the fight for the poor victim. And this is such an excellent collusion, because again, if you change too much, that kind of screws things up too. So now you have a professional ally who kind of uses you in a sense, because the more you play out the sick victim role, the more they get to be the benevolent expert who kind of gets to rule your life and tell you how to live and all that sorts of stuff. And that's really, really tempting too. If you live in a society like Norway, for example, and you go see some psychologists, or you might pay just a little bit yourself for these services, and then the state, meaning the rest of us, through coercion, the threat of violence, are forced to pay for the salary of the psychologist, right? And then you can go on for years, because the least effective you are then as a psychologist, the more money you get from the state. So make sure to select to work with one of those persons too, where their income is associated with being as inefficient as possible, because these people are the least likely to learn new stuff, or to really be innovative, or to really be really sharp, or to really care to begin with, right? So their incentive is just to have you come, every week for years, and make as little progress as possible. They get their salary, they get their social status as the benevolent, altruistic, good human being, and you get your significance by being the victim who no one who can be helped to some extent. Meaning you have to kind of, but it's a great deal, and the rest of us, the taxpayers, we're just these suckers, right? Who sponsor and pay for this whole charade, right? To even suggest otherwise is of course deemed deeply compassionate. If therapists or coaches or agents of change were to say what I'm saying in public, I mean, that's often almost like professional suicide, and a ticket to be socially ostracized. It's the type of truths that you're just not supposed to say, right? Because saying these things essentially means that you're an asshole in the eyes of most, because who wants to sabotage such a wonderful project? Now here's also and also make sure that make sure that you choose a therapist whose incentives are in the direction of you not changing financially. And also make sure that they encourage your victimhood. So someone who wants to drug you, do electroshock therapy, get you on welfare, maybe even someone who has something of a psychoanalytic bent, where you can free associate and fixate on your childhood forever. Anything that kind of gets in the way of you gaining actual self-insight or actual psychological skills. That's great as well. Now, when you it's also very nice if you, like, from the get-go, you can show a lot of like assholic behaviors, and or really ignorant, entitled behaviors. So if you can have some of these covert narcissistic personality tendencies, or at least imitate them, or at least practice them, that really rocks. So I mean, the whole idea here is that people who see clients for a living are humans too, and how people see you is kind of their projection, and it's kind of on them. Simultaneously, we do have a human nature. We have certain inclinations, and there are certain ways you can behave that, unless the other person is a sage or a person with no boundaries whatsoever, they're gonna likely kind of think you're an asshole after a while, and be less inclined to do good work with you. Kind of lose their patience, not really be engaged. So how do you do this? Well, you could start, for example. A very nice way is to not do your homework at all as the client. So, for example, a very nice thing to do is just impulsively go to all sorts of websites on the internet to seek out help, but don't bother actually reading what's there. Just call 15 different people and leave your number, and then when they call back, you can clearly show that you have no idea who they even are, that you have no idea what's on their website. That's a great way to start. If you can also call your therapist at unreasonable hours, like unreasonably early in the morning, or at night when they spend time with their family and stuff like that, that's also a great start. Don't even tell him your full name. Like don't give anything of yourself. Just start complaining from the get-go, and be completely oblivious, and just start telling your story. Just start telling your victim story, and be completely oblivious of time. Feel free to spend as much time of that person's day as possible on the phone. And if the therapist tries to ask you any actual questions or be a bit solution oriented or anything, just ignore the questions and just go back to telling your story again and again and again and again and again. Make sure that you don't listen. Also, make price and location the most important criteria. So just kind of who can offer the cheapest price and who's the closest. Make sure that that's the first questions that you ask the person that you work with, and make sure that you know nothing about the work of the person you're actually working, and adopt an identity of being a skeptic. Not saying don't be skeptical, you should be. I'm saying adopt an identity of being a skeptic while simultaneously making it glaringly obvious that you have no fucking clue what you're talking about. Make sure that you know nothing about these topics at hand, but kind of adopt the kind of entitled skeptic attitude. First time you go to see the person, make sure that you do a no-show. And a very good way to set this up is just cry on the phone, tell your story, ask the person to make exceptions if they can see you as early as possible because you're struggling so much. And then, if they comply to this, do a no-show, meaning don't even show up. And then if the therapist calls you, just say, oh, I forgot. And then take no ownership and no responsibility for that whatsoever. Don't pay for the session. Don't offer to pay for the session. Don't do anything of that. Just be this entitled victim who has license to act that way, and expect to get a new appointment immediately. Now, if you have a client who actually lets you do that, make sure to often postpone appointments too. And really nice thing to do is to send an SMS the night before and postpone, ask to postpone the appointment. It's not that you're sick or had an accident. Just kind of make it really clear that you're entitled enough that, and don't pay for the session or offer to pay for the session either. Just take for granted that it's the therapist or coach who should pay for the session that you cancel at midnight by an SMS the night before, so that they have no chance to book anyone else in. Just completely take that for granted. If any therapist ever objects, remember you're the victim, and then start lecturing that person about tolerance and kindness, and accuse them of having a lack of empathy and a lack of compassion. That's also a really, really nice move. Now, as soon as you meet your therapist or coach, um, just start telling your story. Just start telling your story. Just go into the story, and if they try to ask you other questions, just ignore it and go back to your story. And really expect that the other person should just listen to your story and be empathetic and support your mythology, while simultaneously expecting and demanding that change be quick. Just to make sure that you operate from premises that don't work at all. Now, what else do we have here on my little list? Let's see here. Yeah, there's often a difference between social conversations and change work conversations. So a lot of social conversations are just bantering and telling stories, and people kind of having the experience of being seen and heard. And we often kind of expect the people around us to support our mythology, support our identity, and how we want to be seen. And that's fine. But very often when people come to change work, it's their very way of seeing themselves and their relationship to other people in the world that could use some tweaking. So you want a person who of course can be supportive, but who also can challenge that a bit. Now, when someone challenges your identity and your mythology and your belief, you're likely to get a little bit provoked. Now, if you feel a little bit provoked, attribute to the therapist or the coach the worst possible intentions, and make sure that you shy away and find someone who only supports your mythology and who's really empathetic at all times. I think if you do these things, you have a very good chance of not changing at all. Make sure that, for example, if the topic is marriage issues, make sure to completely not be willing to look at your own contribution to the mess at all. Make sure that you spend all your time in change work pointing your finger towards other people's circumstances and events and childhood. And anytime someone starts focusing the attention back on you and what you're doing or how you're thinking or relating, get offended. Get really, really offended. Don't just settle for psychiatry either when it comes to victimhood. I mean, these days, there's so many in these days of identity politics, there's so many great frameworks that kind of poison your mind to see yourself as a victim and other people as oppressors. So like become a hardcore feminist, like a third or fourth wave feminist. That's really, really nice. Or become a social justice warrior of sorts. Anything that increases that sense of entitlement and resentment and hostility and a sense of entitlement. You do those things, I believe in you. I have confidence that you'll be able to have a miserable life and spend a lot of time with various therapists or coaches and don't really change at all. So if you employ these strategies, feel free to post your success. Of course, another really great thing to do is, of course, to let's say you have anger problems, or you jealousy issues or whatever, tell your partner that you're seeking help, but make sure that your intent is just to use the therapy as an alibi, so that you can so then you have an alibi to your partners. You can say, well, can't you see I'm seeking therapy, I'm seeking help, and now you have an alibi that you can keep doing what you're doing, and you can yell at your partner for not being empathetic or understanding if they expect any change, because can't they see that you're trying, Okay, I think that's that for now. Now, I usually offer people to seek me out as an agent of change, but if you plan to employ any of these strategies, or if any of them resonate with you, don't seek me out. I'm not the guy for you. I promise. Not me. Someone else. Okay, till next time. Enjoy.